My name's Ken Claiborne, and I'm learning how to do that back there, and I was a little delayed. My name's Ken Claiborne, and I'm a member of the Board of the Trustees of this congregation. Welcome to all of you. Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart is a welcoming community encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual, spiritual, and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. If you would like to learn more about this fellowship, please look at our website at uufe.org and join us after the service for coffee hour. For the listening enjoyment of everyone, we ask that you please turn your phones off or turn them to vibrate during the service. Also, if you need hearing support, please ask for help at the sound desk, and the gentleman will help you. Thank you.
Good morning again. I'm Janelle Crump, and I'm a member of the worship committee of this church. I have a couple of announcements. There is the Committee on Shared Ministry has been formed and is now meeting with members Katrina Konopinski, Terry Mark, and Dwight Fish. Terry and Dwight, would you raise your hands? Oh, here's Dwight coming in. Just so you know, so you can ask them questions if you need. They're working with Reverend Dan, and the purpose of the committee is to facilitate meaningful dialogue between fellowship members with issues and differences, and/or with the minister and members. This committee is a thought partner for the minister and provides a confidential space for the minister or members to receive feedback. Finally, the committee may facilitate efforts between committees for better ministry programs. If you have concerns or ideas that are appropriate to this committee, please let one of the members know, and they will schedule a meeting with you and the other parties involved to discuss the matter. Please keep in mind, the committee may not be able to act upon an anonymous feedback in many cases. Anonymous feedback leaves no possibility for questions or clarification of the matter and doesn't lead to meaningful dialogue between the parties involved. And like many watching the news and understanding the magnitude of change before us, brought up a great many feelings for me. I'm sorry, this is written by Reverend Dan. An event this important in the leadership and decision-making of national and global issues will likely have powerful and far-reaching effects. It's important to come together and feel what is in our hearts. It's important to look into one another's eyes and listen to each other for the truth that our hearts may still be trying to find words for. That is why I invite you to come to the church on Sunday, November 10th, that's the Sunday after the election, starting at 4 p.m., where we will hold a special gathering with a Zoom option. We welcome everyone's feelings, and because we encourage diversity, it's important to expect that we will likely not all be of one mind. And because we honor diversity, we will honor the expression of all the feelings that seek the company of community. I invite you to take a moment before then to consider two questions. What breaks your heart? And from where does your hope come? Please summon the courage to also name your feelings as well as concerns for others. Try to crystallize your feelings by figuring out how to capture them in as few words as possible. The exact words are not as important as the feelings. Put this on paper and bring with you the Sunday afternoon on the 10th. With love abundant, Reverend Dan. Our chalice lighting this morning was written by Brian C. Lee. We light our chalice as a symbol of the light within us and the life that flows through the world around us. It is our beacon as we search for truth. It is the warmth in our hearts for love. And it is the energy that propels us to action. May we be kindled by our time together. Now, please join me as we speak in unison our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. And Chuck Bauer has a musing for us.
Well, I've gone through a lot of thoughts and ideas and words and wasn't really satisfied with anything coming into this Sunday, this tense week that we have, and a few more tense days or more. And then out of the blue, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, a new poem from Rich Orloff came, and I thought that's perfect. And I leave this with you not around the idea that we helplessly or hopelessly accept a negative outcome or rejoice over a positive outcome, but that we give ourselves room to accept how we feel after this all comes about. This is called A Prayer of Acceptance by Rich Orloff. He's one of my favorites, poet and playwright, and his poems are on his website and freely shared. After yet another day of disappointment in myself as well as the world, a soft voice whispers to my soul, accept that you are loved, although not always skillfully. Accept that people will disappoint. Accept that you will fall short. Accept that you will make big mistakes. Accept that sometimes you'll usually get a second chance, and accept that sometimes you won't. Accept that you can't control life. Accept you can't pretend your way to the truth. Accept that nothing is permanent. Accept the blessing of every breath. Accept the limits of your brain. Accept that wonder is a gift from God. Accept that there will be times when you're inconsolable. Accept that if you wish to heal, those times need to be embraced before they can be released. Accept that sometimes you'll sit next to someone who sings loudly and off-key. Accept that sometimes you'll sit next to someone and be loved. Accept that sometimes the person who loves you is also the person who sings loudly and off-key. Accept that acceptance isn't always easy. Indeed, it can take formidable courage. Accept that all feelings have a purpose. Accept that acceptance is a divine step towards peace. And now we will dismiss kids to RE, and I'm teaching today.
Stand if you are willing and able, and let's sing 360. Here we have gathered.
a few moments, our morning offering will be taken. And today, our cash offering will be given entirely to the UUFE Sustainability Fund to help cover unexpected needs and repairs. Our entire congregation is required to maintain and grow our fellowship. I believe it is also true that it can take a beloved community to heal one among us, and a healing can become a work of art born of love and perspective, created by many brushes and held in many hands, sometimes stronger at the broken places and often more beautiful than before. While our morning offering is gathered, may we reflect on the love and healing we generously accept and graciously offer each other as we listen to the music of Peter Mayer, Japanese Bowl.
I'm like one of those Japanese bowls that were made long ago. I have some cracks in me. They have been filled with gold. That's what they used back then, when they had a bowl to mend. It did not hide the cracks, it made them shine instead. So now every old scar shows from every time I broke, and anyone's eyes can see I'm not what I used to be. But in a collector's mind, all of these jagged lines make me more beautiful, worth a much higher price. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls. I was made long ago. I have some cracks, you can see how they shine of gold.
April Lidinsky is Director of the Master of Liberal Studies program and Professor and Interim Director of Women's and Gender Studies at IUSB. She is known to WVPE listeners as one of the original and continuing voices of Michiana Chronicles. She continues to be a strong advocate for all humans' rights in our community and is a favorite speaker at UUFE. Welcome, April.
So excited to have a step stool. Absolutely. Watch me rise. Oh, hello. I don't remember this from before. My goodness. Hello down there. So, oh, it's a little challenge I'm realizing for one's progressive lenses. So thank you so much for inviting me back to this space, and thanks to Janelle and everybody who's involved in putting this service together. It's always beautiful to be here, but I gotta say, autumn with this backdrop and these beautiful flowers, thank you so much. So I love the theme of repair. When Janelle and I spoke about when I might come, one, I was way too chicken to come on the Sunday after the election. So kudos to all of you. I love the programming that you have planned. That sounds really beautiful, and probably I'm just going to give away an idea from a friend of mine, Laura, who said, all of us, in the spirit of that same, of what you all are going to do next Sunday, and that is to plan to get together with friends or family the weekend after the election, to put something on the calendar now for whatever it is that we'll need to process. And so rather than being surprised, I like that idea. So Ken and I are going to go to the opera in Chicago with some family members. So, so this song could not have been more beautiful about kintsugi, that idea of mending broken bowls, with the mending making the object more beautiful, not less, because our healing and our ability to heal is beautiful. I think of friends who've designed tattoos that go over breast cancer scars, and of course the idea is not to hide the scar, but in a way to call attention to it, to show that we can layer when we're wounded with other feelings, other experiences, and to draw attention to the fact that we can heal and that healing is beautiful. I also was thinking about one of my colleagues, Jay Vanderveen. He's an anthropologist, and he's interested in bodies. You know, they like bodies, teeth, and bones. So he always starts his classes by asking students to introduce themselves to one another. It's an icebreaker that maybe we could even do as you feel comfortable in the coffee hour afterwards. And that is to introduce yourself to somebody else by telling the story of a scar. And, you know, people have to choose what kind of story they might want to tell, but, you know, it's interesting to think about. We have a child, our younger daughter, Miriam, has a pretty severe scar across her nose, and she's really decided not to have it fixed. You know, it could be cosmetically probably lessened, but she really likes it. And to me, you know, like kintsugi, it just shows who she is. She's a rock climber. She's somebody who likes to take risks, and you know, to me, it's part of what makes her who she is. So, so telling the story of a scar is one way to introduce one another to the idea that we all carry histories. And of course, we know that phrase from the book, the body keeps the score, but also the body reminds us how we can heal. And so that seems very timely for today. And probably someone who's speaking with you this month will raise that Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam, the idea of world repair, and that in modern Jewish circles is really also about social action and the pursuit of social justice. So But today I want to talk about repair cafes, kind of a funky idea of two different kinds. So one is happening a few states over in Iowa, and one I experienced with my spouse, Ken, on the Outer Hebrides of the Scottish Highlands. So I'm going to take you to Scotland today. To start with the Iowa Repair Cafe, and I'll explain what I mean by that term. This is an initiative by a college friend of mine named Jennifer New. She still lives in Iowa City. She works with the university and she's a yoga instructor. And I got to know her when I was an undergraduate in Iowa City at the University of Iowa. We used to study, read Shakespeare plays for 5 hours, which is how long it takes for me to read very carefully a Shakespeare play, in Seashore Hall, which sounds like just this magical place, but it was totally decrepit even then. And I think maybe it's been torn down, but it was a place where we hatched all sorts of plans. So in the fall semester of 1985, Jen encouraged me to apply with her to the National Park Service. So this was way out of my comfort zone. And in 1985, you did this by looking at a paper list. There was no internet to imagine what these places were like. And so we applied. I think you could apply to maybe 4 places and you would sort of sort them. And we got our first choice, which was Acadia National Park. How many of you have been to Acadia? I mean, oh, come on. So when we were there, we discovered lobster rolls and we discovered, the joys of a rocky coastline. And we discovered those carriage paths that the Rockefeller family has given over to people who like to hike. I mention all this because Jen is one of those people who always has good ideas, and I'm always happy when I listen to her. So one of her really excellent recent ideas is this idea of a repair cafe that she's started in Iowa City. I think we could do it here, which is why I wanted to share this idea with you. So the Iowa City iteration of a repair cafe is to establish a community location once a month in an open space. So sometimes they meet in a garage or in an old kind of commerce building that has some open space where people can bring things that are dirty and broken. People bring things that they don't quite want to throw away. So it might be a toaster that sometimes sparks and freaks you out, but it's also sometimes still works. It might be a vacuum cleaner, might be a bike with a broken chain or flat tires, just to name a few examples. And then she arranges to have about a half dozen, sometimes a little more, experts on hand with tools, supplies, and knowledge. So there's a table for small appliances, handheld mixers, radios, etc. There's a table for electronics, so somebody's phone that's hinky or a laptop, a station for bikes with bent rims and rusted out chains. And the idea is not to have those experts fix what's broken. Instead, they're there to teach the owners of the objects how to repair their own possessions. So it's a teach a person how to fish strategy rather than giving them a fish that pays the skills and the knowledge forward. So as with any community project like that, it's partially grant funded, and part of Jen's task is to measure success. And so I want us just to kind of think a little bit about what those spaces might be like, where conversations are sparking that might not spark anywhere else, where broken things are getting fixed. How do you measure that? So, for performance reviews so that she can get another grant. So certainly you can count the number of attendees, and she certainly does. She counts the smiles, what she sees as people learn to get grease on their fingers for the first time. Maybe they're learning to use a new style wrench or holding a wrench for the first time. It's trickier to measure other things, though, such as the increased respect for people who understand mechanics and know how to use tools, especially in a college town where there's a lot of educated folks, maybe even overeducated folks. Every barista has an MFA there. This reminds the community of the value of people who have mechanical knowledge and those hands-on skills. It's also tricky, but maybe important to try to measure the warmth of those conversations bubbling along in those repair cafes in the afternoon. Conversations, as I said, that might never happen anywhere else in a city that has, like most cities, a lot of stratification. It'd be interesting to try to measure the humility in that space and the quality of opportunity, where people can ask questions, try something new, be encouraged to experience the flush of success. But at every repair cafe meeting, there's a really interesting, very literal measure. They weigh the repaired items before people leave with them. I just love this. They have a big scale there, and they keep account of how much waste was kept out of the landfill. So they report back. Isn't that fabulous? There's got to be other ways we can use this where we weigh things that we do. So they keep a measure of the repair to the earth. So certainly my friend Jen sees these repairs cafes as more than a space to repair objects. They're places where the community itself gets knit back together, one re-greased bicycle chain at a time. And I'd love to see this initiative in more communities. So there is an international website, if you're interested, repaircafes.org. It's a little bit like Moth Radio. They have a sort of brand. And so in Iowa City, they wanted to do some of the things that this international organization, I think it started in Europe, does, but they also wanted to do their own shtick. So they had to rename theirs, like, you know, Iowa City Cafes of Repair or something. But I think it could be a really interesting thing for all of us to try here, or even just in our neighborhoods. Thank you for the vodka. No, it's just. I know. So now I'm going to turn to talk about a more metaphorical kind of repair cafe. So here's where I'm going to take you to the Scottish Highlands. Sorry, not sorry. Nice place to go. This is a very Scottish Highlandsy sort of day. On the far western Outer Hebrides, in what was an unusually cold and very wet spring this past year. Everywhere we ran into gardeners who were just verklempt at how hard it was to garden that last season in Scotland. So I want to tell you about a place of repair that friends and I found during a fierce rainstorm on the far northwest corner of Lewis. That's a Scottish island known for its Viking-era carved chessmen. If you want to Google that up, they found these incredible sets of carved chessmen. And it's referred to as an island, but it's connected by an isthmus. Are we going to use that vocabulary term from 7th grade? To the Isle of Harris, which is where Harris tweed comes from, which somehow I'd never really thought about the origins of Harris tweed. So 4 of us aging hikers, friends from graduate school and beyond, in our 50s and 60s, had been hiking on the mainland, and by hiking, little loops of 4 or 5 miles, and then a nice cup of coffee and a piece of cake, and then maybe our version of hiking the Highlands. So we'd driven up from Tarbert the night before to twin huts that we'd rented along the seaside cliffs on that island. And that trip the night before had really been a long one. And you got to remember that this is, Americans driving not just on the wrong side of the road for us, but most Scottish rental vehicles are stick shifts, and so the stick shift is on the other side. So, so there were a lot of challenges. It made for a very arduous journey, and our friend Kathy was driving. She had to go across the Skye Bridge and lots of very narrow roads where there are lay-bys. And so if you ever wonder what happens when you're on a very narrow road and there's 2 cars coming right at one another, they don't play chicken. The car you have to keep track while you're shifting with your left hand of the lay-bys, little slight openings close to the hedges in the road. And if you're closest to a lay-by, you're the one who backs up into the gorse, actually, is what was there. If you read Winnie the Pooh, that was what was in bloom. He gets stuck in a gorse bush, and that was, so it was a tense journey. We didn't arrive at our location until 10:30 at night. We had, done the research to know it would still be light out at 10:30, so we were far enough north that the sun really didn't set at the beginning of June until almost 11 p.m. So we had to get used to putting ourselves to bed during daylight, just like we were, 4 years old and living in Indiana in the summertime. So there'd been a ferry ride, there'd been navigating narrow roads. We finally reached our huts. One was barnyard red, one was like the color of an egg yolk, sunny yellow, just perched within sight of rocky cliffs of Magastura, which is not really quite a village, just a collection of stone shepherds' cottages, but definitely a place that felt like a community. So the morning after our arrival, we slept in a little bit and awoke to just torrential rain. So we'd been hiking, we were prepared, for about the last 10 days with appropriate hiking gear, would schwitz and spit a little. This was absolute downpour. And it might have been really lovely to just stay in our little cabins and read, sit at the window. Each of the cabins had a picture window that faced the sea. The folks who rented them to us knew that people who were staying there might want to cook, so we had 2 little burners, and they'd left a vase, not with flowers, but with fresh herbs. I mean, the whole thing was so lovely. We had a little lampshade that was an antique colander. The problem was that we were out of food. So for breakfast, we'd split the last slices of seeded bread that we'd bought on the mainland, and even a little rental always has a very nice toaster and an electric kettle. We'd split the last apple that we'd knifed into chunks, and the last chunks of red Leicester cheese, which we lived on for lunch. And by this point, by the time we were all kind of pulling ourselves together, it was past noon. The shepherd/artist who'd rented us the trucks, we heard his 4x4 coming by out front, and so we kind of flagged him down and shouted through the rain, like, where can we get some supplies? And he said, well, the store's closed for the weekend. This was a Saturday. And so, great. He said, well, you might be able to find a seat at Fiona's Cafe. I don't know. Give her a call. So he rattled off some numbers, and my friend Kathy wrote them down. The only place we could get any cell phone service at all was in one corner of our tiny little hut. So she came into our hut and leaned into the corner and called Fiona. And I could hear her voice carry through the tiny speaker across the room. And it was not encouraging. I could hear somebody say, yes, you can come by. Yes, I don't know if I'll have room. We'll have to see. Click. Okay, so, but it was all we had, so we clung to hope there and followed the sat nav, which is the very elegant British voice that navigates you when you're in the UK, along some roads into sort of not really a town. There was a petrol station, a little hand-lettered sign that said The Edge Cafe, still just raining cats and dogs. And we pulled up to a little low building, 1 level within sight of the sea. There were 2 cars there, so we were hopeful. We ducked inside. We were sort of shaking off our rain gear in the entryway there. And we walked into an incredibly warm room that was kind of split in 2. One was a just regular kitchen-sized, home-sized kitchen that was just stacked with dirty dishes to be washed up, cakes that were cooling, something bubbling on the stove. It was sort of like seeing your grandmother's kitchen off to the side. And then the other room was a room with just one long trestle table, 10 seats at it. 6 of them were filled. We were 4. So I know, thank you, Chad. We were relieved as well. So we just kind of couldn't believe our good fortune. The storm outside the window then started to look rather cozy when we knew that we had a place to sit down. So we sat down among these 6 strangers. We could see there were, a couple that was maybe finishing their meal, a couple who'd just gotten some Welsh rarebits slid in front of them, 2 women who seemed like they were old friends, and indeed we found out they were, and then the 4 of us. So we'd heard some noises in the kitchen, and then here comes Fiona from around the corner. So she's maybe 10 years older than I am, hair kind of up in a lopsided bun. She's, pushing her hair out of her face. She's got a worn apron on, and she sort of looks around and sizes all of us up. So she says, what do you have? Not one for small talk. And so we're looking, there's a chalked menu board there, lots of little things on it, and we were sort of squinting, just basically hoping, for something easy. So we said, quiche? And she said, no, none of that. So we were looking again, and as we were pausing, she said with some irritation, I make everything from scratch. Those are just ideas. And indeed, the menu board said menu ideas, and it listed things like, there were savory pot pies and stews. And so then we weren't really sure how to say, gosh, anything will do. We're ravenous. So then you could sort of see the wheels turning. She knew there were 6 of us. She knew what was in her larder. And so she said, all right, I could make a fish chowder. How would that be? And we were like, oh my God, that sounds delicious. The 2 other women said, that sounds great. Fiona starts to kind of cook along there. But then there were some problems. So one of the 2 women said, I'm allergic to prawns. I can't eat prawns, shrimp, in our locution. She said, oh, no problem. She says, I'll pull yours out separately. One of our team couldn't do dairy, and she said, oh, no trouble at all. I'll do a soy roux for you. She was just sort of getting into it. And she entered what I would call a flow state, which is true for any of us who enjoy cooking. Maybe a few challenges, but you can rise to the occasion. So she just sort of became a different sort of person and circled around to the kitchen. And then we could hear the sizzle of leeks in her pot. And I'm not sure I believed her that she was going to make this from scratch. But indeed, this 45-minute chowder she began after we'd ordered. But of course, there was no place we wanted to go, no place we really could go in that pouring rain. It was just, nowhere that we'd rather be than sitting there at this table. Repair was underway. So she filled some teapots, and there was all this glorious mismatched china. She brought teapots and cups and saucers to the table, and then left us to it. So the next part of the repair, we realized, was up to us. We were sitting there with strangers, all at a table, our hands cupped around cups, and there really was no trouble making conversation. We were shared, sort of moored felt like being in a little bit at sea in a little cozy boat. So it turned out that the Welsh rarebits next to us were disappearing into newlyweds from Edinburgh. They were adorable, and he had a very shiny gold ring, right when you get married. It was just sort of like, wow. So I think I maybe mentioned, commented on it, and he blushed, and his bride said, oh, he's so embarrassed about how shiny it is. Turns out he's a Forster, and he, is used to working outdoors with kind of tough folks, and he was very embarrassed about how shiny it was. So they actually brought it to the jeweler and asked the jeweler to bash it up a little bit. And then she said, and the jeweler, he got to it and did too much. So then it had to be repolished. So all this very funny little backdrop from them. The Dutch couple who was just finishing up, they were literally like pressing the cake crumbs from their plate and licking their fingers. They'd been to Scotland 6 times. They said we're world travelers, but this is where we come most often. We just love it here, you know, as the storm rages outside. And Fiona came around the corner to rewarm their pot, and she just beamed at all of us, kind of looking around at how things were going and knowing that she did not need to be there. She'd set the table, as it were, for us to do this work. So after a while, the Dutch couple left, and in came 2 German couple. Turned out one was a Mexican national who'd studied German in high school and went to Germany and then went back as a director of international programs. Her German-born spouse was a aeronautical engineer, and they, of course, were fluent in English and Spanish and German. So our friend Martin teased them into talking a little bit about which language they used for arguing, which for business and which for love. So Spanish for love. So by now, the sizzle from Fiona's pot had bloomed into what just felt like an ocean of aromas. And with satisfaction visible on her face, she brought these gorgeous steaming bowls of three varieties of chowder, setting them before us with homemade brown bread on the side, lots of butter. And I just looked into that bowl. It was a work of art. So flecks of sea green leeks, setting off the pink, amber, and gold of the prawns and the mussels, smoked haddock, a sort of rich yellow in the background. And we all just, you know, fell to eating silently. It was as close to a worshipful moment as I'd had in a long time. And it was clear that while Fiona had set the table for our gathering, she left all that important work to us. And how she makes that cafe work with so few seats at the table, I'm not quite sure. But if you're on Facebook, you can actually, the Edge Cafe has a Facebook page. And sometimes I take a look at it, and she brings in singers, she brings in people who do poetry. It really is a gathering space. So by the time our soup spoons were scraping the bottoms of our empty bowls, Fiona appeared to tell us bad news about the final course. She said, "I've hardly anything in the way of cake. I did just take a banana bread out of the oven, and there is some lemon tray bake and some chocolate tort, and of course there's Victoria sponge with fresh strawberries." So that was the bad news, of course, yes. So we ordered Victoria sponge, heard her whisking the cream from scratch in the kitchen, and just marveled at her method, knowing that if you set the table well and give people time and space, humans might just remember how to be whole. And I think that is what happened there, and that is something we might talk about later. Just meals that you experienced that were about so much more than the food, but the gathering that happened. So I want to end with just a teeny bit of Shakespeare from this summer's remarkable production of As You Like It at Notre Dame. Did anybody see that production? It was, so yes, Ken and I went together. I'll talk with you after. So directed by Sarah Holdren, who's just a remarkable director. It had bread and puppet style puppets. And throughout the production, she brought in lines from other Shakespeare plays. So that play, it's a comedy. It's kind of about star-crossed lovers. It's about gender roles. There's a lot of shtick in it. And, you know, it's often good fun. But this one, I know, you know, it was very apparent that she'd put this production together with this historical moment in mind. And the final lines from Rosalind in the folio that I studied in Seashore Hall was, you know, it's a kind of light, you know, Rosalind comes out and has a little reflection and says, you know, I'm a woman who's closing the show, giving you the final lines. Maybe you don't listen to me, maybe you do. This one, for this final monologue, which is just a few stanzas, Holdren weaves together maybe 8 or 9 different Shakespeare plays to come up with a conclusion that just moved me to tears and to me just really speaks to this moment. So Rosalind comes out in the center of the stage, spotlight, everything else is in darkness. And she says, "What should I say to you? Our revels are now ended. The rest is silence." The words of Mercury are harsh after the songs of Apollo. You that way, we this way. If you look for a good speech now, you undo me, for what I have to say is of my own making. World, world, oh world, what have we done to thee? Wrapped and confounded in 1,000 fears, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. The world a stage, the stage drowned with our tears. Yet hope's a lover's staff. Walk thence with that, and manage it against despairing thoughts. There is a world elsewhere, another way, a possibility we've not been taught. Oh, undiscovered country, march we on, still hand in hand, not one before another. The future comes apace, we build it now, here in this very place, with sister, brother. So go your ways for now, no more pretending. New joy wait on you. Here our play has ending. And I'm going to end there too. Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear stories of scars or meals. And of course, we can keep talking in the after time as well. Is this one working? No.
You can use the other one.
All right. Yes, we can. Comments, questions, perspectives.
More Shakespeare quotes.
I've seen that Repair Cafe down at a congregation down in Lafayette,
Oh, really?
but I thought it was beautiful how you brought in more of the meaningful aspect. I mean, I thought of it just in a very practical way.
Yeah, fix
so yeah, like I thought that was such a cool idea anyways, but thinking about people not wanting to get rid of anything and the value that there still is, even in something broken, and that conversation and the smiles, just that. I mean, I thought your whole talk was very inspirational, but that just really resonated, that you brought something more into something I had just thought very practically.
Thank you very much. And of course, wouldn't it be great to have James Taylor come and be our handyman? Oh, hello. Oh, that was great to have that song in there. I do like me some James Taylor. And actually, Ken does a very good James Taylor impression, so I won't call on you to do it now, but it works for me.
I would happily add one very quick detail about the meal at the Edge Cafe, which is at the end. Fiona, having made this beautiful place where her food could do its work and we could do our work, I was going near the door with Martin, one of our friends, and he stopped at the opening to the kitchen and with some specificity thanked her and praised her for something he really loved in the food, and she just blushed with, I think, pride. So just to remember to thank the space makers for their hard work.
Space makers, I like that very much.
Anyone want the last word?
Maybe the last word should be Victoria Sponge.
The next potluck is in 2 weeks. Thank you. Okay, Ken, last word. Next time you'll come and bring the first word. and you speak to us.
All right, thank you so much, and I'll enjoy talking with you all afterwards. And I do really love this stool.
Is Lizzie paying all 5 verses of this? Carl, do you know? I think we'll plan on all 5. If she cuts it off, we'll cut. Stand if you're willing and able, and let's end with 325. Love makes a bridge. She probably moves this along quite a bit. Love makes a bridge and heart to heart and hand to hand. Love finds a way when laws are blind and freedom banned. Love breaks the walls of language, gender, class, and age. Love gives us wings to slip the bars of every cage. Love lifts the hopes that force and fear have beat down. Love breaks the chains and gives us strength to stand our ground. Love rings the bells of vaunted birth and wed day. Love guides the hands that promise more than words can say. Love makes a bridge that lines may shake and not destroy. Love carries faith through life and death to endless joy. Not any time to enjoy those words.
Before we benedict, I wanted to say something about our postlude. I don't really believe that any of us can fix somebody else, but we can contribute to the healing journey. And that's what I asked to focus on today. And I learned something about this song as I was looking through various versions of it. I don't know the name of the head person in Coldplay, but Chris Martin. His wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, lost her father, and it was her grief he was addressing as he wrote this song for her. The author Bell Hooks has written, "Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion." May we go forth with the love that allows us to help heal each other, ourselves, and our world. Amen. Let it be. Go in peace.